Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar. We're doing this in a slightly different style this time. We're calling this one a fireside chat because we've got a guest, Paul Lees, who's the founder and CEO of Bespin Labs, who obviously create Patronum, is joining us because we've had feedback about the sessions we've done on email signatures. Plenty of you want to know more, to dive deeper and understand exactly what's going on under the hood, as it were. So that's what we're going to do today. First of all, let's just think about why signatures seems to be such a popular topic. Clearly, it's something that most businesses want to standardize their email signatures. Well, why is that? Brand recognition, I guess, is the main thing, but also that consistency. So what do you think, Paul? Anything to add to that? Why are people wanting to standardize on their signatures?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, standardization on brand, on messaging, on tone of voice from an organization. But quite a lot of the organizations that we work with, they also have multiple brands inside the organization. So we have a lot of customers, and that's one of the unique things about Patronum is that it's not just about one email signature. You can have multiple brands inside the templates that we've got, different domains, and all those kind of things. And so you could have different types of branding for the different organizations that you are trying to communicate with. And I know you and I have had conversations around this in the past around, what are those different email signatures inside of Patronum, and what are those different email signatures inside of Gmail. So maybe it might be a good point to kind of start off where, from your perspective, the kind of things that you've seen from a Gmail perspective, we can explain to the audience what the differences are within Gmail, and then get
Yeah.
into how that really works inside of not only Patronum but basically the Google APIs, which is what Patronum is built on top of.
Yep, good idea. Okay, so what I thought I'd do first of all is just look at the basic way that people might be managing signatures in their Gmail app right now. So this is the settings page for Gmail. Hopefully most people will be familiar with this. And this is where you can manage your signature. Now, if you haven't got a product like Patronum enforcing your standardized signatures, the best that you can do really is probably distribute the HTML or something for your signature and hope to best that your users are copying and pasting that into here. No enforcement, of course, you just have to manage that through, I guess, policy and encouragement. One thing I did want to just cover here, though, is Google in their settings gives you this option to create multiple signatures. So you can see here I've got the kind of formalized one that we would use in a company, but I've also got the option to create a casual one, and I could create other ones for different purposes, different days of the week, or like you say, if I'm working with different brands, if I'm working under different brand names, I could have a signature for each one of those. So what I'm keen to understand is how we would support that in Patronum. So I guess if we flip over to Patronum now, this is the signature section here. So I'm just looking at an individual user at the moment. So we're in the people view. I've pulled up the details for Gail here, and I'm looking at her signature. And this is where you would create the signature for that individual if you're just doing it for one person. And over here on the right-hand side is where we can choose which of our email aliases or domain aliases that we want this signature to apply to if a person has got multiple signatures, multiple email aliases. If they haven't got email aliases and you want them to have, you can actually set that up for them as well in the settings here. So you could go and configure aliases there. So that would be doing it on an individual basis. But as we know, the power of Patronum is in policies. So if I have a look at the policy view, again, in the signature section here, here's where you would create a policy to generate a signature for each individual. And you can see we're replacing the real information with these variables. Now, I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail about this. We've covered this in a couple of sessions in the past. So go and have a look at our YouTube channel and you'll find those, and you can refresh yourself on how to go about creating these signatures. But again, here, if I went to settings, I could create a new alias here for a person that would then allow them to use that in the signature. Okay. So is it worth, at this point, Paul, looking at what you're doing with these signatures, what information is actually being edited by these signatures via the APIs and so on?
Yeah, so I think it's a good point to kind of have a look at, a bit of a recap. So what is it we're setting? You mentioned email aliases there. You've mentioned the different email signatures that are available. So if you just stop sharing your screen, Stuart, and let me share mine, and we're doing a bit of a tag team here, but hopefully the audience will benefit from this. So again, I've gone into a policy, and this policy has an email signature. Now you'll notice that we've got the primary email address here. So that is the default email address of a particular user. It's the address that the user would log in as if they were logging into their Gmail environment. So in this system, it would be the paularlees.com. However, if we had a secondary domain and we renamed some of the users to be part of that secondary domain, their primary email address would be that secondary domain. So it's not necessarily the primary domain name that we're setting here, it's the primary email address of that particular user. And now in this example, we've also got domain aliases that have been added to the user. So these are what I'm talking about when I say different brands inside an organization. So from a real world perspective, here within Besbin Labs, we're the parent company, we're the developers of Patronum, but we also have the Patronum.io brand. So we can receive and send emails as both those particular domains because it is a domain alias. And we might want to send emails out with a different email signature. So that's where we could, if we wanted to, create a different template. And so I could very easily just put first name, last name, etc. And then anybody who was affected by this particular policy, they would have a sender as address, which was their email address at patronum.io, and that would then allow Patronum to update the email signature for that particular send as address. Now that's all kind of quite confusing. I think, you've got different send as addresses, you've got domain aliases that I've mentioned, I've got secondary domains, all those kind of things are quite technical and quite complicated things. But let me just show you what that looks like from an end user's perspective. So if I click on compose, this here, I'm the administrator of this particular domain, so my email address is administrator@paularlees.com, and that is my primary email address. And this is the primary email signature associated with that particular email address. But I've got multiple send as addresses that I can also send emails out as. And so if I click on this number one, that's got a different email signature. And so I'm potentially impersonating another user inside this system as, all these zeros, one.paularlees.com. And this is the email signature associated with that particular address. Likewise, I could have the sales one. This is a sales, this is a Google group, and we've also then got an email signature associated with that as well.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. That's quite common for people to have a group email address that's managed by multiple people, and to be able to send as that group address, you would create it as an alias, just like that.
Absolutely, and there are different ways in which you can treat the aliases if it is a Google group. So let me just jump into the settings. I'm going to keep this in the non-API, the non-Patronum world for a while, just to kind of give you an understanding as to what's happening from an end user's point of view. So if you then look through the email signatures, we've got the 001, which was the Gareth one here. We've got the 03 one, which is similar but without the image. Then we've got my signature. So my signature is a special thing that Google has created, which basically means primary email address. If I deleted my signature and we deployed a new email signature to the Gmail settings, Google would automatically create my signature inside of Gmail. That's the friendly name that Google is automatically adding to the email signature when we update the primary email address. Now, I've also created this new email signature, which just says regards Paul Lees. And I could go ahead and have the new email address to be just the standard email signature for this email address. But then when I'm replying to emails, Google allows us to have the option to have a shorthand email signature, because maybe you don't want to have the email signature being sent over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that Google hasn't done for organizations like ourselves who use the APIs is we cannot control this at all. The only things that we have the ability to control are the email signatures. And again, I could specify different options for each of these addresses.
So you can
and again,
write
we don't have any control of this.
Yeah, with Patronum, you can write the content of the email signatures, but you can't control which one of the signatures the user has selected for their new emails and their reply emails. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's just a limitation of how the Google APIs work. And so when I speak to customers about deployment of email signatures, it has to really be a carrot and a stick. So the stick is Patronum. It's deploying the new email signatures. The email signatures are being deployed on an hourly basis. So if somebody changes their email signature from a coding point of view, we will come along within the hour and we'll change it back to the way that the organization wants that email signature to be. However, these settings, well, those are in the hands of the users. And so you must have some form of HR policy above and beyond the technical solution that basically says, we as an organization, we're going to set your email signature. Do not change it from the default. And so that should hopefully, through company policy and through the technical solution, that will then allow you to have new email signatures. You can put campaigns associated with them, etc. But let me just jump into exactly where you would see these particular settings from a Google API perspective. So I'm in the developer documentation, and the documentation is really useful from actually trying some of these function calls within the API. So I've gone to reference, and I'm here on the Gmail user settings send as section. There is no such thing inside of Google as an email signature as an entity. It is an extension of a send as alias.
Right.
And so that's where your email signatures reside. So here we can see each send as address has the email address. It has the display name. So in my example, it's Paul space Lees. It has the reply to field that you want the emails to return to. And then it has the email signature, which is a string, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like in a moment. We can define whether or not it's the primary email address. Is it the default email address that is being specified? Do we treat this email address as an email alias, i.e. is it a Google group, or is it another address that we've got? And then we've also got the verification status. As an API, we bypass this particular section. It automatically gets verified. The verifications section is if the end user is performing this task themselves. Obviously, you don't want your end users to be able to send emails as anybody. They must have received an authorization code in order to be able to send as that particular address. we can bypass that through the API. So we make it much easier to set up different send as addresses, such as sending as a Google group. Maybe you want to send emails out as sales at your organization and so on. Now, if I want to get a list of these particular options, I can just click on the list function. It describes what the API call does, but it's also got this API Explorer box, which I find extremely useful. So I can put in my email address here and I can execute this particular request. I've already authorized this API Explorer against my account, but if you're doing this for the first time, a dialog box will appear. You have to approve the fact that this particular application is being able to access your account. And then once we've executed it, we get the return, which is the success, and the code that is then being returned for the send as addresses within my account. Now, this is very difficult to read in this particular section, so I'm going to copy that and I'm going to open Notepad. So hopefully you can see all of that. And I'm going to paste that into here. And I'll just quickly talk you through what has now been returned by the API. And it kind of gives you an appreciation as to what exactly is going on when you set or when you view the email signature through something like Patronum. So we've got the send as address here. So that's the administrator. It's the default, so it's not going to have any different reply to addresses. This block of text here, well, that's the email signature. Now, the email signature itself, the amount of characters that you can store in this section is 10,000. Now, that seems like a very large number, and indeed it is. However, you can, but I wouldn't advise doing this, you can embed images directly into an email signature. You do that through base64 encoding, and that could be thousands and thousands of characters. You may also have very, very long URLs. If you've got a promotion and you've got Google Analytics or some other form of tracking code being listed in the URLs, that could also push the code to make it a lot bigger. We do a number of things with Patronum when we write the email signatures to make sure that the code is as optimum as possible. Predominantly, we're removing any redundant spaces. Some of the coding practices is to put tabs or spaces in order to view the code in a structured way. Those spaces, those tabs count as characters inside the HTML. So we make sure that the code is as compact as possible by removing those spaces when we write it to the Google Gmail settings. When we read it back, we put them back into the view so that it looks nice and easier to modify. We can also see the additional send as addresses here. So we've got another one, which is the group that I mentioned. That's the email signature for that. There are other send as addresses that don't have email signatures. So we've got the Banish IT bottleneck email address. We've got the one where I can send out as Gareth, and other accounts that I can send out emails as, but I don't have email signatures associated with those particular users. But if I just jump back out of this and then jump back into Gmail, we can see those additional counts in the send as section. And so these are the accounts that have all been set up. You saw the Gareth one, you saw the Jordan one. This is the admin one. Those are all the additional send as addresses that have been added to that particular account, and these are the ones that have a send as address, and therefore they have a particular email signature. So is there any questions on that, Stuart? Does that kind of sound?
Yeah,
I know it's quite complicated.
Yeah, it certainly gives you an appreciation of everything that's going on behind the scenes. There's an awful lot of activity going on. When you just set up a signature in Patronum, you think, well, that's nice and easy. That's done. Patronum's actually doing an awful lot of work behind to make sure that doesn't hit any API limits, and making sure that it gets out to all of your users, which is great. There is an additional topic though that comes up quite often, and that is to do with pronouns. We
Ah, yeah.
uh, we did a video about it a little while ago. We did cover pronouns because there's a quirk to the way Google handles pronouns, isn't there? So perhaps you can talk a bit more about that and the way you have to do things in Patronum to make sure that pronouns are getting covered properly.
Yeah, absolutely. So pronouns is something that Google introduced a few years ago, and they've done a really bad job. Being absolutely, blunt with you. They added this myaccount.google.com. If I just jump back out of this particular section, here's the profile or the personal information related to the account that I'm logged in as. I can have things like birthdays, genders, these are pronouns, etc. Now, if I edit these particular attributes, a couple of things that you'll notice. If I just jump back, my gender is male. However, when I log into this section, the gender is woman and man. Again, just inconsistencies between how Google are representing this information. There is also the pronouns, and again, if I look here, I've got he/him as the pronoun, and anybody can see these particular pronouns. Now, when I say Google did a bad job of implementing this, it seems quite straightforward, and indeed, if anybody goes and has a look at my account or this particular account through any of the Google services, those pronouns are going to be displayed, and I'll be able to communicate that information to people. However, as a developer and a development organization, I have no access to any of the pronoun related information. Now, inside of Google, there is an attribute that could be used, but there's no mapping between those two attributes. And let me show you what I mean. Again, I'm going to jump back into the APIs, and this time I'm looking at the admin console APIs and specifically the directory APIs. And this particular API and the Explorer for this is super useful for when it comes to again, just looking at what's behind the covers when it comes to users. So I can have a look at the user section. Got an overview here of all of the attributes, and the thing that we're interested in is the gender section. If I jump down to the documentation on the gender, which is here, we can see that there is the type, which is female, male, other, or unknown. There's a custom section where you can add any kind of custom property that you wish. And there is also gender address me as. Now, Google says that this could be used for pronouns such as he, him, his, etc. However, they do not get mapped to the previous section that we've just looked at. Gender does, so the gender gets updated. So if I update the gender in the About Me section, that will then translate through and update the Google directory here. The pronouns do not. So they are completely separate. So if I go on to list, and in fact, let me do a get. And I put in the administrator here. I'm going to do a full extraction of the information, and I'm going to do the default, which is an admin view, and I'm going to execute that. Same process will go through. It will request for me to approve the application, and it returns everything that's in the Google directory. So I'll do the same that I just did with the email signature. So I'll just take a copy of all of this, jump into the code here. Let me do a new one. And let's paste that into this section here. So this is the Google directory as far as my particular account is concerned. So we've got things like the the kind of user I am. I'm logged in as an admin in this particular scenario. We've got the email addresses. Now these, funnily enough, these are different to the send as aliases. So these aliases, these are receiving email address aliases. So these are aliases that we can see inside of Patronum that I can receive an email as. That information is stored in the Google directory. It's not stored within the Gmail settings.
Okay.
And I can have any email address here, and I will be able to receive emails for those particular email addresses. In fact, I can also create a send as address as those. It's just that I've chosen not to in this particular example. We can then go through. Each section has different attributes associated with it. So we've got the addresses, we've got the organizations, telephone details, languages that are configured. Languages are configured through the About Me section, and again, those will map through to the Google directory. The non-editable aliases, those are aliases that are assumed by the user because the domain has a domain alias, and so you automatically inherit those particular receiving email addresses. But if I then just jump through to the gender, you'll see that the gender has been updated and I am listed as male. There is no attribute listed there for pronouns.
No.
So if you wanted to add something like a pronoun to an email signature, you would have to do that directly in the Google directory. And the only place that I've seen that updates that particular attribute is Patronum. And so what you would do is you would come into Patronum and click on here. So we've got the policy. Let me just jump back to the user, the people section. I can then click on my account here. So I click on more information. I can then edit the details. And again, this is the information that is being read directly from the Google directory. So all this information, as you can see, cool email address, all of these are in the text extract that I've just got through. And if we just have a look here, I can then start to add the pronouns into that section. So if I just put he/him/his as Google have recommended, and I can update that particular section.
And although that field is called pronouns, you're actually writing that into the address me as.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So if I now just jump back into the API again and I execute that one more time, we should be able to, if I just scroll through here, in this section here, that now we've added the pronouns to the Google directory, and now those can then be added to the email signature. So that's effectively what's going on. So we do get a lot of customers who they've advised and their users are updating the My Account information, thinking that once they've done that, it's going to just replicate through. Unfortunately, Google haven't helped us in that regard. So you obviously need to work with your users to populate that particular attribute. Now we've got a solution for that inside of Patronum. So if I click on the edit here and I go to the custom attributes, we can find the attributes that I'm interested in. You might want to add additional attributes, but if I click on the employee information, we've got this editability option here. We can go through and we can click on Own Profile. And once we've saved that, that means that users can log into Patronum and self-serve and therefore update their own attributes, because Google doesn't allow them to update these attributes by default. So again, we're allowing the delegation of some of those responsibilities to the end user. So you might want to say, well, let's allow the end user to update their own gender and pronouns in the Patronum interface, which will then update the Google directory as opposed to updating the other system which has no API support for it. And then once you've specified that in the Google directory, again, you can just go back to the email signature. And if I just expand and we'll just have a look at that email signature that I was looking at previously. So let's say I want to add it there, so I can go people, it'll be there. And so now if I preview this, I know Gareth has got them, but if I go to my admin account, those are now being pulled through from the Google directory into the email signature. And so they'll be brought into the email signature and then populated automatically to those particular users. So hopefully that kind of, I know it's very long-winded, but unfortunately it's a complicated process. Google could have made it a lot easier, but you know.
Yeah. Well, so I guess the important thing is set up Patronum in the way you've just demonstrated, so that users can self-serve and change their own gender and pronouns. Then there's a human process involved in getting people to go ahead and do that. But I guess they should also be updating it in their My Account page as well, because that probably pops up in other Google applications. So it's the end user's responsibility to do it in both places and keep them the same.
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, we've logged a ticket with Google on the issue tracker that all developers have access to, and we've suggested that they provide the same synchronization that they've done with gender with the pronoun attributes. But it's been a number of years since Google introduced genders, and I'm not quite sure if it's going to be fixed anytime soon, unfortunately.
We won't hold our breath.
No.
All right. While you've got that screen up there, it reminds me about another question that people have around the Google Analytics. So you've got that feature in the sort of bottom right there around setting up analytics for your signatures. What exactly is that all about?
So basically, it's a very quite a trivial feature. It's all about tracking the clicks in the email signature through Google Analytics, and you do that through the codes that are added to the end of a email address that then can get tracked based on campaigns, etc. So you would normally build this in the campaign URL builder. So this is a Google Analytics kind of development and demo tool, where if I just wanted to create a campaign-based URL, I could put in my website, which is Patronum.io, for example, and then I can just specify what's the type of campaign that I'm doing. So maybe we're doing a Xmas special. Okay, and what is the source? So because this is going to be an email signature, we can say email signature. And what's the medium? Well, that's obvious. It's going to be email. And then you can add additional information, such as Xmas, is it a paid one, etc. That will then generate this particular URL. And so if I clicked on this URL, Google Analytics would track the fact that the links that have come to my website were generated based on this particular campaign. So we're just emulating this particular process directly in the tool. So you can basically specify, so it's Patronum.io, the source, which would be email signature, the medium, which would be email, the campaign name, which would be Christmas. Maybe I want to track any subdomains, so demo.patronum.io, etc. Once we add this, once we turn it on and we add this, any URLs inside the email signature that has Patronum.io on it will automatically, through Patronum, be given the code that tracks those particular URLs. So I'll just cancel this. We've got this footprint flow as an example, and
Yeah.
there's a URL related to that. So if I just click on the source for that, there's an example here where we've got one for Facebook, but it's not the Facebook kind of stuff. But if it was Facebook and we were tracking that, it would add the code to the end of the URL specified in the URL builder that we've added to the email signature. So you'd then be able to track any email link that had the Patronum.io as a link on it, and it would then add automatically the source, the campaign names, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, it's a very basic thing of tracking,
Right.
but it just helps
Yeah,
organizations.
and I guess it's just a way of seeing how successful email marketing has been, perhaps, or
Absolutely,
seeing
yes. I mean,
what the reach of our email has been.
yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got a customer at the moment. They're doing a Christmas campaign, and they're tracking the Christmas campaign specifically through email signatures. And so they've got the campaign. So the campaign will be being done through different mediums.
Mhm.
Having the source as email signatures can then help the people who are building that campaign to see where are we getting the references from. Are we getting them from the email signatures? Are we getting them from the email bodies themselves? Are we getting them from paid adverts? All those kind of things. Then you can see where the success is coming from the marketing that you're pushing out.
Okay, good.
And generally, you do that on things like a banner and those kind of things.
Mhm. Okay. There is another question, and you kind of briefly touched on it earlier on, but we kind of sailed straight past it quite quickly. So I want to come back to it, and that's how quickly Patronum will change a signature back to the standard one if a user goes off piste and changes their signature for themselves manually. Then a Patronum policy should put that back to the standard one. But when will it do that?
Yeah, so policies are running every hour. So as we can see here, if I just scroll up, this particular policy, this ran several years ago. It was a test policy that we did.
Not active. Yeah.
If I enable this policy now, it will run pretty much immediately.
Okay.
And the way that we've designed our infrastructure, we obviously have a lot of back-end services running all of these policies. So the policies are constantly being queued and then executed on an hourly basis. So every hour, once a policy is finished, we then take that policy and put it on the queue after the hour has elapsed. Once that policy gets to the top of the queue, the policy is then executed and the email signatures are updated. Now, if you had a email signature and you came in on a Monday morning and you said, actually, I need to have this brand new campaign and we want to get it to all our users immediately, you can turn off the policy and then wait a couple of seconds and then turn it back on. Now, what that does from an infrastructure perspective is it moves that initial run onto separate infrastructure that runs policies immediately. You're still in a queue, but it's a much shorter queue. You can kind of class it as a VIP queue. So any policy that is enabled is moved onto the VIP queue and then is executed at that particular point in time. And then once it's been executed, it'll then move back into the standard queue, and then it'll wait an hour before it then gets triggered. So there's a couple of things you need to consider when you do run a policy. Is first of all, it's going to be, if you can enable it and disable it, it will run immediately. What I generally advise is once the policy has run, you can check that through the logs up at the top. but I would also check the users that that particular policy has applied to. And so
Okay.
what I would do is I would go and find the user. Let me just click on my account again. So just click on that. Click on the email signature. I would check in this interface, because what we're doing here is we're reading those Gmail settings in real time at the point
Okay.
that this is being read. This is not a cache. This is real
This is
data
pulled
being
it
read
from
from the Google
Gmail.
system.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Now, Google's Gmail doesn't do that immediately. So if I go into my Gmail and clicked on Compose, I may have the previous email signature still, because Google doesn't want to be constantly downloading an email signature, because generally speaking, email signatures don't change on the back end. The end
Right.
user changes the email signatures and pushes them to the Google system. However, there is a periodical pull from Google to make sure that it's got the correct email signature. So what you might find is that Patronum has updated the user's email signature immediately through the policy or through the direct updating the information directly. What you might find is that it hasn't reflected into Gmail. In fact, we can do that as a test. So let's just go back to here and let's just call me Paul. And if I just update my email signature here, that information has now been updated and pushed to the Gmail settings inside of Google. However, if I come back into Google and if I click on Compose, I'm still Paul Lees.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm just going to jump back here, that's all been successfully updated. I can close that, come back in, still Paul. The only
Even
way
if
that
you
I can
refresh the
force
whole
this,
browser window, it's still.
well, if I refresh the browser window, Google is now making or the browser is now making a call to Gmail to say, bring me down all my settings.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I can now click on Compose, and I'm now Paul.
There we go. Yeah.
And so if you're testing email signatures, don't be surprised that whenever you click on Compose, it's the previous email signature. You're only going to get the latest email signature from the Gmail infrastructure if you refresh your browser. Now, there is a periodical refresh inside Gmail automatically anyway, so the end users will eventually get the latest email signatures, but it's not instantaneous. So if you're going through designing and developing email signatures, you're better off creating the policy, turn it off, turn it on, refresh your browser in Gmail, and that you will see it appear. If you can't see it in your Gmail settings, just verify inside this section here that it is in fact has been updated and it is exactly what you are expecting. Like I say, we're reading the Gmail settings in real time in this particular section of the tool. In fact, everything inside Patronum when it comes to the user section is being read in real time. We don't have anything that we are reading from a database perspective. We want to make sure that what we are presenting to customers is the Google system, and it's not our own system that you then have to wait for some form of, synchronization, etc.
Yeah.
And all the attributes as well. All the attributes here that you saw. In fact, if I bring up the this section here, every single attribute, every single custom attribute that is visible, the photo URL, which is a Google setting, that's the image that is set for the user. What else could we have? We've also got the user defined, so we've got these have been set for this particular user. These are attributes that are extensions to the Google directory that we've added. Those can be viewed through these options here. So you've got all of the additional attributes that are being fed through Google. Again, that's all in real time. I think we're one of the only solutions on the market that reads the Google directory and allows you to manipulate that data in real time.
That's really handy for troubleshooting as well. So if you not see the signature, then you know, or rather, if you are seeing it in here, then you know Patronum's done its job right. If you're not seeing it in Gmail, chances are
You just
it's
need to,
Google's side of cached
yeah,
it.
you just need to wait a few seconds, or you can do
Yeah,
a refresh. You could also do a hard refresh on your browser, a couple of
yeah.
keyboard presses and refresh. That'll force the cache to be cleared.
Okay. All right. The only other question that has come up in the past that's kind of related to signatures, but not entirely, is about email footers, which is a setting you can have in the admin console, which is normally used by an organization to put a disclaimer at the bottom of
Hmm.
an email. And the reason it's a separate setting is so that it doesn't show up in absolutely every email that you have in your mailbox, because it just, quite the lengthy sometimes. And that gets appended to the bottom of the emails when they are sent externally. I think I'm right in saying that Patronum has no connection with that. When you set an email signature in Patronum, it's not affecting that in any way at all. But worth you
Yeah,
confirming.
absolutely right. And again, unfortunately, those settings don't have any APIs associated with them. So it's generally for legal disclaimers, the type that you want to add to external emails. And so we're not going to affect those. In fact, those disclaimer options, they're just a generic footer on the email. They're not customized to each individual user. It's just generic for the entire organization, and it's something that you can't have user-related information in it in the way that you can with an email signature policy, where we're taking the email address, the name, the telephone details, the companies that they're in, images for the people. Those are in the email signature that we can then read the Google directory and write it to the send as address settings. If we want to get really specific about this, we don't have the option to update, modify, or interact. But the good thing is it has no effect on the email signature. It's just appended to the email signatures when they get sent out. A couple of other things that I see from customers on an email signature point of view is fonts. A lot of organizations have purchased fonts that they use on their website, and they want to embed those in Gmail. That's just a bad idea. You can embed fonts, web fonts, in your email signature. The problem with doing so is that once that email has been sent to somebody else, they get stripped. So and the system reverts back to, a standard web safe font. So it might look completely different. If you've created something and the font spacing is a particular is in a particular way, your email signature may look a little bit skew once it's been delivered to other people. So fonts, I would generally stick with what we call web safe fonts, and those are the fonts that are listed here. There's not a great deal. There's not a lot of fonts. There's not a lot of options, but you are safe to use those particular fonts because they'll be picked up and they are standard across all interfaces.
Every receiving system is going to have those fonts.
Absolutely. So whether or not you're reading it in Outlook or Thunderbird or the Mac client, it's going to be standard across all of those clients. Whereas if you add custom fonts, you can't guarantee that it's going to look the same across everybody. And then the other one is images. And I know you've done videos on and tutorials on how to embed images to death. We've got some great documentation on the help system. The videos that you've done are fantastic. The only thing I would say about images is keep them the size that you want them to be displayed. There was a bit of a trend where, and it was generally because of the iOS devices and how they rendered images, and they would look absolutely crystal clear. So what people were doing is they were adding images that were huge, but then turning around in the HTML. So let me just show you what I mean by that. So I've got an image here. and that image is at the top somewhere. So yeah, it's here. It's on it's on the website. And we're basically saying that we'd like it to be this height. Now, it could be that this image itself is ginormous, yet we're telling the HTML, resize it on the fly to be this size when it's being displayed. What that means is it's just telling the browser to take this image, shrink it down, and then display it, but you're still downloading the large image.
The file size is the same, yeah.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things there. Number one, you're forcing people who receive your emails to download a much larger image than is necessary. The other issue is some clients, and generally it's the Outlook clients, completely ignore the width and the height settings.
Yeah.
So they get stripped off. And so what you then get is you get the original size of the image being embedded in your email signature. So if you've got an image here that is 3 times the size, but you're shrinking it down so that it looks really, really clear on an iOS device, when it comes to being read on a Windows machine with Outlook, you've then just got a humongous image. And so from a development point of view, when you're rolling it out, you're testing it between other Gmail customers, it looks great. It looks fantastic on the Gmail app on your phone. The problem is when it gets to Windows-based or Microsoft-based email systems, they completely ignore those settings, and then you get these large email signatures and large images. And sometimes people might not even tell you that your email signature just looks ridiculous. They'll just have a bad impression of you. So again, just a word of advice around the email signatures and the images that you want to embed in the code there.
Good to know. I guess that's a strong message for testing as well. Don't just assume your signatures are going to look good everywhere. Test them.
Yeah, and test them on multiple clients. If you can. I know it's very difficult to do so, but test them on different clients because different clients render the code, the HTML differently. And just one last final tip, if I may, is about designing email signatures. So this part of the tool where I'm in my account and I'm looking at the code, this is the HTML, as we've already shown, that is stored in the send as address. There is always a danger in a design or a designer or a design agency creating you a very nice email signature and then giving you the code for that email signature. Do not be tempted to take that code verbatim and paste it into the email signature settings here, or indeed inside a policy. What I would typically do is I would load the HTML in a browser and then copy and paste that from the browser into Gmail and then have a look at it in this section here. Because you'll be surprised to find that, generally speaking, Google does a really good job of just stripping a lot of the excessive code that the designer may have added to the HTML. They may have used things like cascading style sheets and other things that are obviously not permitted when it comes to an email signature. An email signature is not an email page. Sorry, it's not a HTML page. It's embedded into the email, which is embedded inside the browser. And so you need to make sure that it doesn't try and reformat the page that it's in. And obviously Google will strip all of that out when it's being read and written to the Gmail settings section.
One of my bugbears is when you get an email signature that's really wide and that they've got a fixed width to it. Maybe it's got an advertising banner or something in it, and that causes the whole email to be wider than the view pane in your whatever client you're using. So you've got to scroll left and right to read your email, which drives me mad.
I mean, there are some general recommendations. If you chat with the chatbot and ask it, what's the recommended length? We've got a lot of knowledge base articles that talk about the recommended size of images, the recommended size of the table, because effectively an email signature is just a set of tables. In this example, we've got a number of cells, a cell for the image, a cell for this section here, and then a cell for all this information. We can then embed that information inside the table. It makes it a lot easier to work with. You can define the width of that particular table, and you don't have that experience that you've just described, Stuart, where you're dragging the email body left and right because the email signature has kind of pushed everything out. So yeah, there are recommendations on the size of a table and the size of an email signature.
Brilliant.
So I think we've actually done email signatures to death now.
We've covered a lot of ground.
So hopefully that's going to be useful for customers. And yeah, if there's any questions that you have, please post them in the chat. We will answer them as the webinar continues. If you've got any questions after the webinar, again, just post them in the chat. We'll get round to answering those. And if there's anything that you'd like us to cover in this kind of depth, again, please feel free to post and we can get into those details. So with that, thank you, Stuart, for organising this, and thank you everybody for watching.
Great. See you next time.
Thank you very much.